Egypt's most infamous pharaoh was not Ramesses the pigeon-toed, not Thutmose, the one who built those massive temple complexes at Karnak and Luxor, nor was it Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. No, Egypt's most infamous king was this guy, Pharaoh Akhenaten, who ruled from 1353 to 1336 BC. His legacy is one of hubris and ambition, and his impact on Egypt was both immediate and long-lasting. For starters, he changed the religion of an entire nation. He moved the empire's capital city. He took on one of the most powerful military forces in the ancient world. And he completely revamped the way the royal family looked and acted. But while he achieved all of this, he also single-handedly plunged Egypt into chaos, and it would never recover. Akhenaten came to power when Egypt was at its greatest cultural, political, and economic zenith. Over the previous 3 centuries, Egypt had been ruled by the 18th dynasty, with many great rulers expanding Egyptian influence over Nubia to the south and into the Levant to the north. Egypt was rich, stable, and safe. In fact, things were so good that some scholars refer to this time as the Egyptian Golden Age. But Akhenaten's advisors likely told him that there was no better time than the present to start his reign. And so he did. When he came to power, he married a woman named Nefertiti, who was the daughter of the official who ran Egypt while his father was pharaoh. Together they had 6 daughters, and they ruled as co-regents. But it wasn't exactly a partnership, because Akhenaten made it clear who was really in charge. The couple stood in front of a wall relief, depicting them with the traditional pharaonic iconography, so they look pretty regal. But the king is depicted bigger than his queen, which was standard practice. Then again, Queen Nefertiti was quite tall, even by today's standards, standing around 5'6". So having her depicted smaller than the average male was not that big of a flex. Now, it's well known that Akhenaten had a weird obsession with showing himself as having feminine features. His head looks almost androgynous and effeminate compared to more traditionally masculine depictions of other male pharaohs. It's obvious that Akhenaten wanted to emphasize his slender figure, elongated neck, large hips, and small waist. Some scholars think he may have been gay, while others say that his fascination with all things feminine could be explained by his wife's dominance over the early years of their marriage. Whatever the reason, these kinds of portrayals were completely unheard of in Egypt before Akhenaten, and wouldn't become common until Cleopatra's reign about 2 centuries later. Still, despite breaking all of these royal molds, Akhenaten was actually quite conventional when it came to his choice of a capital city. Like every pharaoh before him, he decided to make some improvements to his favorite city. Now, unlike most pharaohs, Akhenaten didn't choose Thebes. He selected Amarna, which was a small village about 200 miles northeast of Cairo. Akhenaten established a new capital in Amarna because the region was smack dab in the middle of Egypt. Before this, the capital would shift between Thebes and Memphis depending on the season. But Akhenaten liked the idea of being able to travel throughout his empire without getting all hot and bothered. The new city was situated near a quarry full of high-quality limestone, which meant that building projects would always have the materials that they needed. Also, the natural landscape of the region was dotted with natural gas vents, so it was probably pretty well lit at night. It was a win-win situation, and Akhenaten began planning his new city's layout. He designed a grid street pattern with wide boulevards and parks. He brought in artisans to build grand houses, palaces, and temples. He commissioned dozens of artists to paint colorful murals on the walls of private residences. He dug a canal and built a pleasure boat harbor. Basically, Akhenaten wanted to turn Amarna into the ancient world's first planned city. But instead of making it a place where regular people could live nice lives, he made it into another imperial capital. That's because Akhenaten's urban planning coincided with the beginning of his religious revolution. You see, up until this point, the Egyptian religion was polytheistic. There were many gods, but they weren't mutually exclusive. Amun, the supreme god, ruled over everything from his capital in Thebes. He had a bunch of different domains and aspects, but he mostly focused on maintaining order and balance in the universe. Amun had a son named Mut, who was the goddess of motherhood and femininity. The two of them ruled over the Theban triad, along with another important deity named Khonsu, who was the personification of the moon. Together, they had everything they needed to run Egypt, that is, until Akhenaten came along with his radical ideas. You see, the new king was obsessed with the sun god Aten. He was a relatively minor deity who was often grouped in with Ra, the sun god. But Akhenaten wanted to make Aten the sole supreme leader of the pantheon. He issued a royal decree that read, "There is no god besides Aten. No god has been found. He is hidden, he is far away. Come ye now, all of you, adore the Aten." So like any self-absorbed, egocentric teenager, Akhenaten announced to the entire known world that everyone else was wrong and he was right. And then he went to town on spreading the good word. He rebuilt Karnak Temple, destroying everything related to the old gods and replacing it with images of Aten. He constructed a brand new temple complex dedicated to his one true love in Amarna. He changed the names of towns to include the name Aten. He encouraged everyone to change their personal names to reflect the new national religion. He literally put Aten in everyone's face. And if that wasn't enough, he actively persecuted anyone who opposed him and his new religion. Priests who refused to convert were thrown into the Nile. Temples that resisted were torn down, and sculptures of the old gods were defaced. Anyone who didn't immediately fall in line was beheaded. It's hard to imagine how such a benevolent ruler could do such a tyrannical thing. But Akhenaten's rule was not always so peaceful. In fact, his war record is spotty at best. The year after he became pharaoh, he led an invasion into Syria in an attempt to protect Egypt's interests in the region. But this campaign ended in disaster as Akhenaten's army was decimated by the Hittites, a force that would later destroy the entire Egyptian empire. It's believed that after this defeat, Egypt's neighbors saw how weak their once great empire had become. So they banded together and attacked. Akhenaten barely managed to hold them off, and by the end of his reign, most of his military advisors had been fired or exiled. By all accounts, Akhenaten was a failure as a military commander, and he knew it. You can see his inner turmoil in his art. One relief shows him wearing a fake beard and holding a fake scepter, trying and failing to look like a tough guy. Another statue depicts him wearing armor, but he's too scrawny to fill it out. His insecurities are written all over his face. And yet, despite being such a failure, Akhenaten continued to pursue his domestic agenda. He opened his empire to foreign influences, allowing miners from Nubia to set up shop in Egypt. He allowed Syrian merchants to establish businesses in Alexandria. He recruited the help of a Canaanite architect to design his new capital. He reached out to Mycenaean Greece for new artistic inspiration. He brought back prisoners of war from Syria instead of killing them. He dressed his daughters like boys and gave them prestigious government positions. He introduced a civil service exam to replace the hereditary nobility system. He kept prostitutes employed in his pleasure boats. He provided free health care for all citizens. He built schools to educate the public. Basically, Akhenaten was the crazy, rich Arab of ancient Egypt, and even though he failed to conquer Syria, he did manage to conquer hearts and minds throughout his empire. For example, after he died, his religious reforms were undone. The old gods returned to prominence. Aten was forgotten, and his memory was purged from official records. But there's a problem with erasing someone from history. If you don't know anything about them, you'll likely forget what they did. And if no one knows what they did, it's easy for future historians to repeat their mistakes. So we need to remember Akhenaten, not for his failures, but for his accomplishments. He was the world's first true revolutionary, a man who challenged the status quo and dared to believe that things could be better. He may have been an obsessive, narcissistic, genocidal tyrant, but he was our kind of tyrant. Thank you so much for watching. We've been creating content about ancient Egypt since the dawn of our channel, and we're just getting started. There's so much more to come. So hit that subscribe button and join us for the ride.